In this lecture, we're going to examine a very specific example of how we can use research approaches and statistical applications to answer some questions of interest. And so the research question that will be posed here is, do professional athletes make too much money? And in this regard, the question is asked in a way that would only trigger a yes or no response from respondents. However, it might be better useful to generate a different approach to this research approach. And instead of stating a question, we would just simply make a statement that professional athletes make too much money. And in this question, we're not actually evaluating how much money the athletes make. What we're actually examining here are the attitudes of people and their thoughts related to this issue. And so one way to do this that provides a little bit more sensitivity to the response of individuals is to use what's called a Likert scale. And a Likert scale is a scale that is often used to assess people's attitudes or values or opinions that they hold. These scales are designed to be used in a wide range of different environments and are often used to evaluate consumer opinions. And so in this specific example, if we wish to conduct a research study investigating how people view the salaries made by professional athletes, we would start by making a scale numbered from 1 to 5 and assign verbal descriptors to each of these numerical values, where a person would indicate a 1 if they strongly agree with the statement. Remember, we're not asking a question here, we're making a statement, and we're just evaluating if the individual person strongly agrees with it, strongly disagrees on the other far end of number 5, disagrees, or is just neutral or undecided on the issue. In this scale, the numerical values do not indicate any inherent value to the opinion. It just categorizes the opinions of people depending upon where they stand. Now, in order to continue with this research question, we further investigate the issue of how much money professional athletes actually make. And so in order to investigate this, we now have to conduct some of our own research. And where can we find this information? Can we get this information from Wikipedia? No. Wikipedia is an open online source that can have information inputted from a wide range of different areas and may or may not be valid, but unfortunately there's very little way to confirm that. Can we get this information from research journals? The answer is no, because there are many professional athletes and the likelihood of finding this information in research journals is very, very low. Can we get this information from the news? Maybe, but the news usually reports the salaries of the high-end athletes and doesn't present a full picture. And so to answer the question of how much money professional athletes make now becomes much more specific in that it actually depends on the sport. And so a website that is considered to be a valid hub for this information on an athlete-by-athlete basis is sportscity.com. And sportscity.com obtains this information directly from professional leagues. And so to shape a person's opinion is to understand the truth regarding the salaries of professional athletes, and that's where statistics plays a very important role. And so these are professional athlete salaries over the 2014 and 2015 years. And so if we examine the salaries of athletes in Major League Baseball, in both the American League and the National League, before we actually look at those numbers, we have to first determine from how many athletes are these statistics generated. So the statistics that you'll see here in a moment were generated from 439 professional baseball players in the American League over 2014, over the 2014 season, and 429 players in the National League. The average salary, respectively, is about approximately $4.1 million per athlete over that season. The median salary is quite a bit different here, and so we will review basic statistics in a subsequent unit, but the first observation here is that the mean and the median are very, very different from each other, and that's going to give us a clue that these data are not distributed in an equitable way. The standard deviation, which is a measure of how those salaries vary among all 439 and 429 respectively, and we see that the standard deviation is actually higher, is a greater value than the average salary. The highest salary paid out among all these athletes, $28 million for one athlete in the American League, $32.5 million for one particular athlete in the National League. The lowest salary paid out, as we can see here, $465,000, $443,000, indicating that salary equity in professional baseball has a very wide range. Specific to the sport of football, once again, before we even get into the actual statistics, it's important to understand what the sample size was. And so we see a much larger sample size than we had for professional baseball, 1,242 athletes, 1,275 athletes, and in professional football in the United States, we see a similar type of pattern where the standard deviation of the variability of salaries is much higher than that of the average, and that's reflected in the single highest salary paid out and the single lowest salary paid out over the 2014-15 season. And in the National Basketball Association and the National Hockey League, similar patterns emerged where salary equity just simply does not exist in these professional sports. And once again, when we examine statistics, it's very important that the very first thing we identify is the sample size. Another way in which we can examine these statistics is to use some sort of graph. And so in this bar graph, what we see here are the individual sports plotted along the x-axis, or categorized along the x-axis, and the descriptive statistics, which reflect the average for each respective sport, and the standard deviation are plotted along the y-axis. And so the error bars are a very important and critical element when using graphs to depict descriptive data, because the error bars provide that indicator of how the salaries vary among the athletes in that particular sample around the average. And so in this particular example with the National League in Major League Baseball, we see the average is just above $4 million per athlete. However, the error bar indicates that very few athletes would have a salary that is exactly at the average. Many are below and many are above. And so we see by using this bar graph effectively, we can simultaneously get a visual pictorial representation of all the sports at the same time, as opposed to examining the the actual numbers, which may make it more difficult to compare sport to sport. And so by plotting along the graph, we can see that the average salary over the 2014-15 year is greatest in the National Basketball Association, lowest in the National Football League. So this ends our part 2 of our introductory unit.